Hello Gates at 95 years old, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the world assumed her story had faded into silence, Joanne Woodward finally whispered a truth she had carried for most of her life. Sitting in the quiet home she once shared with Paul Newman, she spoke with a softness that only time can carve into the human soul. Our life wasn't perfect, she said, but it was real. And in that single confession, she opened a door to a love the world thought it knew, but never fully understood. Why did she stay silent for so long? And what was the truth that she felt ready to say only now? Long before she was half of Hollywood's most admired couple, Joanne was just a girl from Thomasville, Georgia, sharp-eyed, curious, and in love with stories long before she knew she would one day live inside one. Born on February 27, 1930, she found her refuge in school plays, local theater, and the flickering light of movie screens that transported her far beyond the small southern streets she grew up on. Her dream wasn't fame, it was expression. Even as a child, she understood people in a way that felt older than her years, a sensitivity that would later make her one of cinema's most intimate performers. After studying drama at Louisiana State University, Joanne set her sights on New York. The city in the 1950s was a world humming with ambition, and she dove straight into it. Under the guidance of Sanford Meisner, she trained not to act but to feel it, to live inside her characters with honesty, not theatrics. It was this emotional authenticity that caught the attention of early television directors, then film producers, until finally, in 1957, Joanne Woodward exploded into Hollywood with The Three Faces of Eve. Her performance wasn't just good. It was seismic. Within months, she went from an unknown Southern actress to an Oscar-winning trailblazer whose portrayal of a woman with multiple personalities set a new standard for complexity on screen. But behind that meteoric rise, she crossed paths with someone who would define her life far beyond any role. Paul Newman wasn't yet the icon the world would come to adore. When they met, first in an agent's office and then as understudies in the Broadway production Picnic, he was married, struggling, and quietly fighting the insecurities that haunted him as an actor. Joanne, already more seasoned and confident than she appeared, saw through the handsome face to the earnest, dedicated man beneath. Their friendship grew slowly, quietly. But what came next would shock everyone. By the time they reunited in 1957 to film The Long Hot Summer, their connection was undeniable. On screen, their chemistry crackled with something raw and unrestrained. Off-screen, the boundaries of friendship blurred into something much deeper. Newman's marriage ultimately ended, and suddenly, the love they'd both tried to resist became impossible to ignore. On January 29, 1958, in a tiny Las Vegas ceremony, they became husband and wife. And only weeks later, Joanne stood on the world's biggest stage accepting the Academy Award for Best Actress. It was as if destiny had chosen the same moment to crown both her talent and her love story, but behind the fame, the truth was far darker. Their marriage, though legendary, was not a fairy tale. Paul Newman struggled privately with guilt from his first marriage, with the pressure of fame, and later, with alcohol. Joanne carried the weight of both their brilliance and their burdens, balancing a demanding career with motherhood as they welcomed 3 daughters, Nell, Melissa, and Clea. She was the Oscar winner, yet she often stepped back to create stability for their family when Paul's stardom pulled him further into the public eye. And this was only the beginning of the heartbreak. Tragedy struck with unbearable force in 1978 when Paul's son from his first marriage, Scott, died at just 28. The grief was suffocating. Paul blamed himself. Joanne held him through the darkest hours, holding together a home shaped by sorrow. Hollywood never saw this version of them, the version where silence lingered longer than laughter, where guilt pressed itself into the walls, where love survived only because they refused to let go, but no one knew what was coming next. As Paul aged, he found refuge in philanthropy, channeling his pain into purpose. Joanne watched him transform himself, even as the years carved new lines into both of them. She continued acting, producing, mentoring young artists, and directing theater in Connecticut, quietly shaping the arts community far from Hollywood's glare. Their life became slower, gentler, built on shared glances and private jokes instead of red carpets. And yet beneath their calm surface lay decades of battles fought together, side by side. When Paul Newman was diagnosed with cancer, time suddenly became painfully precious. His final days were marked not by fame, but by closeness, hands held across quiet rooms, memories retold with trembling smiles, and the knowledge that their 50-year partnership, with all its imperfections, had been something rare. When he died on September 26, 2008, Joanne's life dimmed. She lost not just a husband but the companion whose presence had defined her world, and now, at 95, as she faces fading memory and the slow retreat of time, Joanne has finally spoken the truth she once guarded so fiercely. She said their love was not perfect. They argued. They hurt each other. They endured storms no one saw. But in the end, what remained was laughter, tenderness, and a bond deeper than fame could ever build. What's left, she whispered, is if you can make somebody laugh. And he always made me laugh. Her confession is not a scandal. It is a revelation, the reminder that the greatest love stories are not flawless, they are fought for, protected, and lived in the quiet moments no camera ever catches. Today, as her memory fades, one thing